Hi, I'm Willie White, Artistic Director of Dublin Theatre Festival and former classmate of Mark O'Brien at UCD.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, I actually before we go out myself. Yeah, I have to say we go back quite a while, and let's go back a bit further than that, Willie. When you were growing up, was a life in the arts something that was kind of destined for you? Do you think?
Absolutely not. I grew up in Abbeyleash, County Laois. I was in the Abbeyleash North National School variety troupe who won the Laois Heat in the Community Games in 1982 when we represented Laois. But I never was, this is not anything against my family, but I never went to a gallery until I was an adult. I never saw a professional play until I was an adult. So my route was through kind of liking bands and hearing about the bands that they liked, and then hearing about Andy Warhol by the Velvet Underground, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But then the first time I went to saw an Andy Warhol painting or painted by anybody would have been when I was over navigating on the sites in London the summer after my leaving.
And would music have been a big thing for you, Willie? Was like
enjoying it, yeah. I mean, I have a guitar behind me that I still can't play properly. But I enjoy, like lots of people, like teenagers are into music. It's what's accessible to them. A little bit of literature as well. So that was my routine.
Yeah, and then so if that wasn't part of any part of your upbringing, what happened then? How did it happen for you?
Well, I did an unremarkable leaving cert and was down to do science in UCD. So I was walking across the science block and I bumped into the sister of a friend of mine who told me about Dramsock, which I'd never heard of. And they were doing freshers auditions, so I went over and auditioned I was a fork carrier, I think, in a production of Lady Gregory Spreading the News, and that was it. I spent the rest of my time in UCD in the LGs, the lower ground floors. We knew them of the arts block. Dropped out of science, did an arts degree. A few years later, did a master's. So I was in UCD for quite a few years at that stage. Yeah. That was just bumped into people and enjoyed it, and it was that kind of. What I liked about it was that kind of collective making. I mean, there's people like you I still know from them, lots of people I still know. I was talking to Colleen O'Connor last night, I was bringing him for his happy birthday. People I know literally that length of time, almost 30 years. And it was in my life at the short term, it was very formative and enjoyable. I mean, what we were doing a lot of the time, some of it was high art, but some of it wasn't. But it was this thing of making things together with people. I certainly gravitated towards, much more so than going to my lectures or reading my course text.
Yes, I can concur on all of that. But I think as well there was, if you look back actually at that, wider area of kind of 6-7 years, there's a huge amount of people that were involved in Dramsock and the peripheries that are still involved in all areas of. And I think it was interesting because it's kind of, we talk about this a bit. People that were still around from that day, but like that was, even though I said the work kind of ranged from the bizarre to the really bizarre that we all thought was amazing, but they were reviewed by the Irish Times, so there was a kind of sense of at certain points the output was being put into the general public beyond your peers, and that kind of, I don't know, maybe it's been a feeling.
We suffered from the burgeoning of fringe theatre in Dublin, which is kind of fair enough. So the attention moved there. But certainly my debut production in Dramsock, which was an arrangement of the text of Sylvia Plath, was reviewed by Victoria White. Middling, I think it was. But, it was amazing to get that kind of attention. Yeah. And the Student Drama Festival, which was the culmination of each year, also used to get similar attention and was a very big deal for us.
And you as well, I mean, through that time, like you were involved in all aspects of it. I mean, you were auditor at Dramsock. You were kind of, but you're also involved in all aspects, from directing to acting. There wasn't. Yeah,
I acted a lot, although I never really had any ambitions to be an actor. I just enjoyed it and people asked me to do it. Sometimes at short notice. I kind of, again, directing wasn't something that I was aware one could do, so I did that Sylvia Plath. And then because at the time I felt it was important, like my thing was always about my understanding of what was contemporary, so I really wasn't interested in doing classic text at all. I thought we had to make plays about now. So I directed some Carol Churchill plays. I was with a version of Top Girls that I think had at the Student Drama Festival had an interval that was longer than the first act because the scene changed when they arrived. But the next year I won Best Director with the Dermot Bulger play, One Last White Horse, which had been at the festival, Dublin Theatre Festival a few years previously. And kind of, again, that was about a topical issue like addiction that it felt to me when I was reading, even though I'm not from Dublin, it felt like something that made sense to do now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I directed and acted and was auditor. And then with pardon?
That sense of the contemporary come kind of, was that something that kind of really kind of grabbed you then, Willie? Was that kind of?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know why it is. Maybe I'm just very literal. But I never really liked, I mean, it was the same thing when I was artistic director of Dublin Youth Theatre. What I really was interested in having young people do was new work. And my mantra used to be no young people playing children, no young people playing adults. I just wanted them to, because you could argue that it's a bit narcissistic, but I suppose I would say it's more punk, which is make what you can with what you have about what you see, do you know? And then, there would be a generation of people who would still be pals of mine from GYT who kind of came through that, not because of me, but because of the opportunity they were given and the talent that they had. That was very much my kind of thinking. And it's funny, actually, it's still reading back to, let's say, a Dramstock yearbook, a note I was banging on about contemporary, giving out about Arthur Miller and Brian Free, who I appreciate, of course, but wouldn't be what I was drawn to in terms of, the art.
And through that time, I mean, was a career in the bubbling in your head? Did you have an idea of kind of this is the area that you wanted to know?
I wanted to be a director, I suppose I thought, because I'd finished, I succeeded at the Student Drama Festival, and then I set up a French theatre company, and then with Jason Byrne, who never attended UCD but was very involved in Dramstock, Jas Byrne, not the Bray Wanderers, former Bray Wanderers footballer, nor the comedian, but Jas, pardon?
Oh, you're right.
We set up this. Yeah, we set up this theatre company, and I wanted to produce a version of Jim Cartwright's 2, and Jas had an idea to do kind of strip back Caesar, and because I just thought that was a better idea, I kind of gravitated into what I would call now, one would call now a producer. It's a simplified version of it, and that went well, and so kind of took off in that direction. I did a Wojciech. I think that was it again. And then I ended up working in RT a few years later, so I went off in that direction. But I never knew about art. I never knew you could make it, and I never knew you could administer, because these weren't things that were suggested to me or that I knew other people who had done them. And
so when you left college and kind of got involved with, say, Loose Cannon, and kind of started like leading, with Jas the company, and a company that kind of started to, hit the ground running, let's say, and kind of started getting noticed as one of the companies of that era that kind of were emerging from kind of student drama into the professional. Like, was it a sense then of, like, were you aware of the wider industry at that point, Willie? Did you have a sense of kind of not really, no. I mean, like, I didn't go to my first production, The Abbey, until I'd been in Dublin for 4 years, actually more than 4, and it was because Aidan McCardle, who was in college with us, was in it. Bob Fall's production of The Iceman Cometh. I was brought by the father of a then girlfriend to the gate. Well, I spent most of my time on UCD, so I was completely clueless about what was going on in the city centre. And that would be one of the things I think you miss out on. It's great in terms of being kind of hermetic in your own community, but not really in terms of connecting with wider practice. So no, I mean, I caught up on that really once I started getting involved in Project Art Centre, particularly the Fiat Neil came and saw a Loose Cannon show in the Crypto Art Centre that was at the time in Dublin Castle. We were invited to Project and we did a bunch of shows there, and that was me just having my mind open to contemporary art, to contemporary dance, to music, of the kind you find it. But so that was my education in that sense. I didn't really have it in Project or in UCD particularly. And go back then a bit to sort of from those Loose Cannon, those early Loose Cannon shows. I also want to say I made the sandwiches for Flyboy Night in Northern production at the International Bar. I think it was the summer of 92, maybe. Yeah. I used to go down to the Tesco in Sandymount and make them and bring them for lunch. It was played by Conor McPherson, called Radio Play. Yeah, I was going to say that there was kind of a couple of companies that came out of that summer, or those couple of summers. They were kind of further ahead of us and more serious and more successful, I think. Culminating in the success. Well, first it was The Light of Jesus, which got a different name. Kevin Healy did Kevin Healy did in City Arts Centre, then Gareth Keogh did it for a fringe, one of the first fringes at the Furnace that was in the USI venue. And then obviously the big success was the Slam Tree Bar at the Crypt, which then was at the Bush, or maybe at the Bush first. Sorry, I knocked you off your stride there. Because I think there's kind of, there was, and I suppose jazz, in a way, Jesus, Mark, this is ancient history, though, isn't it? We're really old. We're only as far as 1990 something. All right, you're grand. I'll speed up in a minute. No, but I think that the interesting, because I think it is interesting about that kind of very early mid-90s that there was, and also that those years in Dramstock, looking at your further career, there was also an awful lot of mixed arts. There was kind of people who were heavily into music and went on to music. There was people who were heavily into literature and went on to literature, but all kind of hubbing around Dramstock. But I think when did the RTE thing happen for you then? How did that come?
I was working in Milano, still there on Dawson Street, doing an MPhil in theatre at Trinity. And my mother sent me an ad in the paper. They were looking for people to be involved in this rebranding of Network 2, as it was. There were going to be talk shows, so they had an arts, a politics, and a lifestyle section. So I was in a group interview, and in the first season, which I think was December '97, I was on a few shows and I presented a few of them. And then John Kelly came in as a presenter, and I managed to wangle my way into being a reporter researcher. I was persistent, so I did that for 2 seasons until that show was cancelled in '99. Then I trained as an assistant producer and worked on the first 2 seasons of The View. So we're into the 21st century by now, Mark.
I'm going to go back first though. Around that time, I mean, like from knowing you back then and currently, I mean, I think it's fascinating hearing the sense that you hadn't got a sense of kind of what you were doing, because you always come across some very precise and directive in kind of your thinking. You know, they kind of, and it's fascinating. I know, but like back during that time when you were kind of loose cannon and then on to RTE, was there a sense there, Willie, that you kind of went, okay, that, you know, obviously you decided that you wanted to be in the arts, but was your radar on, you know, what section, what area, or was it just trying to find something that suited?
I think like the experience of the 2 formative experiences in my 20s would have been project, just discovering all these practices that I wouldn't have had exposure to really beforehand. And then RTE was great training, a great formation, and I worked in arts programs in, you know, 2 seasons of 40 each, maybe met a lot of artists of that time. And I still was thinking about, still remember the kind of real terror maybe of like walking into a visual art space the first time I did it, you know, like a contemporary place, I won't name it, to meet an intimidating but actually quite nice character who was a famous artist. But eventually you get in the swing of things. And I suppose I felt I would have been making a case for some of the art forms or the artists that wouldn't be at the top of the, you know, on the radar in, you know, in terms of the program at the time later on too. So fighting that battle, stretching it, which is making a case for, and also learning about what can work in television and what doesn't, and who might be interesting and who might talk about it and what they might say. But no, it's funny, I got the job in RT like 10 years after leaving school, and I was going to my 10-year school year, and it was my first proper job. Immediately beforehand, I'd been, you know, reasonably good waiter in Milano, but, you know, so that was kind of like, I spent my 20s, you know, fringe theatre, catching up with my unremarkable grades, hanging around project, having the crack, and this is my first, and I spent the guts of 4 years in RTE. But I was very happy to get a job in project then after that, and that was again another really formative experience of 9 or so years. But I don't know. I mean, you figure out the direction backwards.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have been aware. Okay, there's a place called Project, and you know, there's an artistic director, and they're hiring a new one, and maybe I'll apply. First time I didn't get it. Second time I did, and that was actually, you know, the first paid job in the arts that I ever had. I mean, you literally used to administer loose cannon from the house we were living in Donnybrook, with your towel around your waist, getting out of the shower, sending an email on the fancy computer that you just bought with your first Arts Council grant. We had a fax machine as well. Somewhere I have a recording of them, because we were particularly Jazz, very enamored of Eugenio Barba and Odin Theatre, and I have a recording on the fax to come answering machine of Eugenio Barba. So I have it somewhere in a minidisc somewhere. Rang us on that machine. It's very exciting. Wow. Back in the day. So, and then you go and do the day job. So Project was the first proper job. And fairness to them, they took a risk on me, thankfully.
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose it's worth saying before we kind of go and talk about Project, the era there of like the 10 years you're talking about was a time of kind of great change in Irish theatre and culture as well. Like the Fringe was kind of starting. There was a lot of energy, you know, around.
Yeah, I mean, it's the era where that, I mean, I'm not going to be comprehensive, but there was obviously others before, and Passion Machine, Wet Paint, and so on. But the year when our contemporaries emerged, like Loose Cannon, Corn Exchange, Bedrock, and so on, you know, those companies were emerging at that time. And it was very exciting, I suppose, because of the age you are and the possibilities, and because you don't have to try and make a real job out of it just yet. It was a time of great energy. I mean, the only concern is, I suppose, I would maybe everybody thinks that about when they were young. It would be, I don't know, maybe it wasn't amazing. Maybe it was just amazing to us. I certainly had a good time.
Yeah, well, there was that, but I think also I think the social structures were a bit different in the fact that you could afford probably more to be kind of on less wages or to be kind of working from.
Yeah. Dublin certainly wasn't as expensive a city, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And not every space was going to be turned into an office development or a hotel. The things we're familiar with, and certain house share companies have never been heard of or invented.
Yes.
But you hear Rough Magic saying the same thing as well, even more so, saying that when they started out in the 80s, it was even more liberal and possible. Yeah. It's certainly difficult now. We know this, and we've heard stories in recent times of artists having to emigrate because they simply can't afford to live in Dublin.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't be hearing that discourse in the 80s and 90s for sure.
Yeah. So applied, got the gig and project, and your first big arts gig. And was that a sense of? Did you go in there with a sense of? I don't mean trepidation, but a sense of like going, oh my God, okay. What am I going to do? Or how, like...
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'd be spoofing if I said it was otherwise. But I mean, the thing the detail I forgot to add was because I encountered the project and heard about its story, when I was in Trinity doing the Masters, what I did for my thesis was write a history of the project.
Yeah.
So I'd spoken to the protagonists who were there in 1966, and I went right the way up to 1977. And so I knew all of the folklore and the infighting and the rationale. So I understood the project quite well, I thought, even though it had been founded as an artist collective, and this is not what I was taking over as being, like the artistic director of, an administered organization, where still with a structure of members of the co-op kind of thing, but it was professional, and we were engaging with artists in different ways. So that's just, and what I wanted to bang on about it, I was preceded by a very tumultuous period, which is all in the public domain of project, where artists were signing petitions against the organization's leadership. So I remember actually being at a meeting in the Cube and project where things kicked off, people were asking questions. So I just, really simply went back to basics and said, just start talking to artists. Diffidently at first, if you didn't know them, some of them I would have known, of course, through my work in the View. Yeah. And then just start building up relationships. And again, banging on about the contemporary, have to be contemporary, lads. Don't be doing this D&D stuff unless you've got a good reason for it. So that's, and that would be, and again, remember, I knew some of the artists socially at least because of our loose cannons experience of projects.
And I mean, one of the many legacies of your tenure there was that relationship, the copper fastening of that relationship with the artist. So that's something really that comes natural to you, do you think? Is that, is that mind, or is that kind of interest, that's something that kind of sits at the core of you?
Yes. I mean, although you could ask artists, and they might say, I never stop droning on about any old shite, and where do I get off? But as somebody who enjoys art and the ideas, that inform how it is made, certainly that was something that was very enjoyable for me, or fulfilling for me, my time and project. I used to kind of walk out of the office in the evening and you'd bump into somebody in the foyer and you'd be gone home half an hour later. And I really liked that about project. We got a new table, or we're getting new tables, we got a capital grant, and we'd all been to see this place in Flanders because Grant, the former curator, was opening a show in Mucke in Antwerp. And we've been in lots of settings where people sat around tables. So we're going to have tables anyway, but they were going to be sleek and white. So I said, no, I prefer if they were brown because they look more kind of domestic. And those tables are, like, a lot of great stuff was happening to those tables, I believe. The other thing as well is, you should say about projects, I mean, there's obviously, clearly it wasn't me alone being, some kind of like superhero. I already came into a situation where there was a strong team there and they were welcoming of me and accommodating of my inexperience. And eventually, we, people like my colleague and friend Eve O'Donnell, who's the general manager there, who's now at the Mermaid, and people like Grant, Tessa Giblin subsequently. So, it's not just one person, it's lots of people. No organization can run on one person. I certainly don't think anybody thinks that, and I don't either.
Yeah. And I think as well, Willie, like the sort of, and did that feed that kind of international aspect to your persona as well? Like, excuse me, was that kind of, obviously something that had been always there from remembering you back in college, but that sense of kind of that exploration, that interested mind of, outside Ireland.
Yeah. But I wouldn't even say I had it, to be honest with you, in college at all. I was quite ignorant of international art, really, really ignorant, didn't know anything. And like a friend of ours, Derval Murphy, who starred in, or who appeared alongside with you in the Death of a Salesman. Derval had told me about I never heard of the Edinburgh Fringe, not messing. And went over and tried to get a job in the box office, failed. My missus did, Julie. And then tried the next year and failed again, but got a job as a doorman outside the Gilded Balloon. And Edinburgh kind of blew my mind. Saw loads of stuff that I thought was amazing because I'd never seen anything like that before. I'm always banging on about how I saw work by the German choreographer Pina Bausch, about whom Wim Wenders made a film a few years ago, passed away 11 years ago. And that just blew my tiny mind. I had no idea. I went there because there were £5 tickets. I met a guy I knew from Queen's University Drama Society who said, "Are you going to see that Pina Bausch?" I said, "I'd never heard of him," but I went anyway for a fiver. And it was just, in a way I recoiled because it was so unfamiliar, but it was just amazing. A piece called Nelkin, where the stage is full of carnations and people are signing to The Man I Love, the Gershwin song, and there are people leaping off scaffolding towers and there are stations on stage and men, and it's just amazing. And that was my first encounter with really kind of, highfalutin, high class, post-war European art. And then, Edinburgh would have been a staple over many years. And then I suppose actually once I went to Project, because we had seen plays by Romeo Castellucci at the Theatre Festival in 99, with Giulio Cesare, and in 2000 or 2001, his, what was it called? Oh, Genesi, which was a trip, amazing. Actually, Castellucci hasn't been back in Dublin for maybe 16 years. And then started in Projects, went, let's go out and see what there is in Europe.
Yeah.
So I went with Jazz, actually. We camped in Avignon, saw a Castellucci show there. I was a bit of a fanboy for a few years, went to see shows. And then, discovering things like the Kingston Festival des Arts in Brussels, which had not long been established at that stage, which is still a really important kind of platform for new work from new contemporary work, in many disciplines from international artists. And then actually, weirdly, Vallejo Gantner, who's the director of the Fringe, and Vallejo was very sophisticated, came from an artistic family, had really great artistic connections, hung out with him in Brussels. He passed the mantle to me, I don't know why, of being the representative in Ireland of Airwaves, which is a dance platform that selects the work of young choreographers. I hadn't a brief. But I went along and kind of, I would say spoofed my way through, or didn't say very much, which for me is unusual, and was a part of that for a number of years. And we would meet in various European countries, I think it was October, to select the work of these choreographers, initially watching VHS tapes, but then just kind of dealing with grown-up European performing arts professionals and hearing about the artists that they were referring to and the way they talked about it, and trying to get a bit more confidence in my own opinions, or trying to get opinions to be confident about. So that was my first eye opener, in terms of like professionally, when I was at the Project. And then through IETM, the Performing Arts Network, which I really started in earnest in 2008. And again, the first meeting I attended was in Ghent, which is close to Brussels, in this cool, really cool art center called Vooruit, which is the Flemish word for forward. A place that became, student activists opened it in the 1980s. It was a building from the beginning of the 20th century. And it was then and is now still, from the 80s onwards, one of the kind of like really important crucibles of contemporary creation in Flanders, which actually has many of them. And lots of international artists work there as well as local artists. So that was kind of really kind of getting off in the kind of, and it's still like Irish theatre as is in terms of the Irish theatre tradition. But what I like is doesn't have to be one or the other. They're quite irreconcilable in some respects. Kind of literary theatre tradition, and then a tradition from Europe where there is no theatrical literature, like it's all contemporary creation or devised work, whatever. Yeah. But I suppose I found it intoxicating and stimulating, and then I was just kind of like, that was amplified once I started the Dublin Theatre Festival, the opportunity to travel more widely and to see more of that work more often, and then through participating in EU funded, like that was really, really lucky break. I just started. I was just about to start actually in DTF, and we were invited by the Kingston Festival in Brussels to be part of an EU project for 5 years. I was going, yeah, great, sounds cool. the application was successful, so we were part of a €2.5 million project, and we for those 5 years with 6 or 7 other organisations, we talked about projects to normally you go to a festival and say, oh, I like that, is it available maybe next year or the year after, or of course you'd be kind of talking about the slate of things you might or might not do. You can introduce projects yourself, and just the kind of collegiality and the learning from that was absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, we failed twice to get a third term. I was joining the second term. We failed twice to join that. But there's still the learning was there, and still I have friends and colleagues and artistic sounding boards from that experience, which is fantastic.
And in the in project, when you had that kind of mind awakening for international work for yourself, like kind of juxtaposing that and kind of was there a hunger among Irish audiences you found at that time for that type of work, or for those type of collaborations?
I think they might have been peckish. I don't know how hungry they would be, but I certainly think we're working with. There would be a legacy there from project. Already I've been thinking of programming like when I would have seen Desperate Optimists there back in the mid-90s. I mean, there would be less. There would be fewer of those, or even actually, it would be particularly that I should mention is Pan Pan's International Theatre Symposium, which used to happen in January biannually, I think it was, in Trinity. So, availing of the quiet time of the year and before the Lyra existed. Gavin Crean and Damien Cosgrove, who were alumni of Trinity, would go in there. And I saw some interesting international work, kind of coming from the people that Pan Pan would have met when they were touring throughout Eastern Europe, kind of laboratory theatre type work. So that was, I was predisposed towards it, I think. And I felt that if the Irish artists were already making the work in Ireland, that with a little bit of money that we had in project, we could present some international pieces just to kind of stimulate a dialogue. So we would have presented the likes of Gobspot and Force Entertainment, kind of obvious candidates in a way. Back in the day, that was Gavin had presented, or Pan Pan had presented Force Entertainment, but smaller pieces, durational pieces. They did Speak Bitterness and Quizula, so we did Bloody Mess, which is one of, for want of a better word, one of Force Entertainment's biggest hits, made on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the company, nearly 40 now. And then did, with the support of the British Council, did a season of live art in November 2004. And then with Dublin Docklands, as it was at the time, did seasons, short, small festivals, I think 2006 or 7. So again, we're an island.
Yeah.
There's another island in between us and Europe. We tend to pay most attention to English language theatre culture, and we think that is the norm, whereas actually there's a whole big other world out there. There's not much international work seen in Dublin year round. The occasional thing of Project, Dance Festival, Fringe, and Dublin Theatre Festival, or when it was a project. So I feel that it's important to show some other, you certainly can never be comprehensive, but to show some other possibilities connect to different practices. But then you would see, like, in recent years, I'm sure I miss out people, but if I think of the practices of people, Pan Pan for a long time anyway, but then companies like Broken Talkers, of course, like Theatre Club, even Malaprop, people are, it's almost like, I think, it's not like, I believe that, Irish theatre practice has broadened out so much. But then again, if you want to go back, you'd be thinking of the likes of Blue Raincoat and Barabbas, or Co-Motion before that, in terms of people who tried to liberate, or even back before that again, something like The Great Hunger. But trying to liberate Irish theatre to add to Irish theatre's repertoire, palette, something other than text-based theatre.
Yeah.
Or, sorry, go back further again to operating theatre. We're in the 70s now, or go back again to projects in the late 60s. And actually that's a kind of a call it a tradition deliberately, but it's a tradition that's kind of forgotten about willfully because it doesn't necessarily produce text. So you can study text. Now, of course, theatre scholarship has gotten, and teaching has gotten much more sophisticated since then, and particularly with the advent of affordable video recording, there's no excuse anymore. Whereas if you kind of think about it, there are lots of shows probably relevant to the noughties that they're just gone.
Yeah.
So they're lost as a part of our history. Yeah. But I do think that the theatre practices, and you see this, in terms of like artists like, I wouldn't necessarily say he's from the European avant-garde, but people like Michael Keegan-Dolan, the fantastic international reputation that he has, the strong relationships that Landmark Productions would have through the works of Enda Was particularly, and also Enda collaborating with Donnacha Dennehy, with international venues in Scotland, UK, England, and the United States. So I think our theatre's become more international as well, and the practitioners more international and more mobile. Whereas I guess what we expected in the past would be like productions of canonical plays would be all that Ireland would be offering, or maybe a Brian Freer premiere, but like the last, blockbuster from Brian Freer was Lunacy.
Yeah, and that transition then from project to theatre festival. I mean, at that stage, Willie, I mean, had practice yourself gone out? Has you kind of got any sense of kind of making or directing or acting? Had that kind of left you? Is that kind of something that was?
No, it's never left me actually. Just nobody's invited me. I mean, when I was AD of W Theatre, I directed a play by Emma Kirwan, and I feel I didn't sell it very well because I was kind of distracted by being in project at the time. That's how it worked out that year. But no, I mean, I'm really interested in plays and how they're made and who they're made with and why they're made and how they turn out. So I'd love to. I don't think anybody would trust me though. I'd have to work my way back in. Maybe a rehearsed reading. If anybody's stuck for a director of a rehearsed reading, I'm game. I did a 24-hour play once, most recently, and I had a great time. Was it Elaine Murphy script, I think? It was exhilarating, particularly because of the format of the 24-hour plays. But I think you're only invited to do it once, and that was it. But yeah.
Okay, and come here then. Sorry, DYT. I mean, a seminal organisation or a crucial organisation on the kind of for many different reasons in Dublin. How did that come about for you?
I was invited by a board member of DYT to become. I had no really strong connections to DYT. I knew some people who were contemporaries of mine, and again would have seen The Girls of Summer '94, written by Jerry Stembridge, who I saw swimming there the other day in Dollier. Because somebody who was in Dramsop with us was in it, Sean Green, and I worked with the Arts Council. And so I would have been aware of it, but it was only then that I got the invitation. And then I came in with my dogma of no young people pretending to be adults, no young people pretending to be children, but young people being young people. And I was just really lucky. I wouldn't say it was, and I was told with support, of course, from Maria Schweck, who was the general manager at the time of Dublin Youth Theatre. It kind of worked out. I just stuck to my dogma, and was fortunate that there was a very talented generation of people like Shane Byrne, Darren Cody, Gemma Collins, Grace Dias, all those kind of people. Stephen Kennedy, Sean Thomas, lots of people, lots of talented people. Who then went on. Some of those went on to form Theatre Club or to have their own practice. So and then that was good timing, I guess.
And then the next step for you is the theatre festival. I mean, again, like I suppose what you spoke about there in relation to what project opened up for you was kind of obviously opened up hugely again in relation to that role and kind of the work that you had to do and what you wanted to develop in the festival. Was there something in your head that you wanted to both professionally explore yourself and for the festival? Like, was there any particular you went in with?
I suppose the Flowery Hills are always greenest, by the way. So you always think it's going to be really easy. There's loads of money in the next job, and it never is. It turns out. So I had been preceded by a very successful time in Dublin Theatre Festival. Lachlan Deegan, its director, had presided over 5 years, where the organisation enjoyed the biggest commercial sponsorship and the longest commercial sponsorship it ever had in its history. That came to its end just as I was starting, so there was kind of a reset. And I just kind of had to figure out, so in other words, one of the things we wouldn't be able to do is as much international work, because obviously once you add in freight, travel, accommodation, that's quite expensive. We got to the point where a few years later, the Arts Council gave me a smackdown for doing too much Irish. And there was maybe a concern that I hadn't let go of the relationships I had from projects. But for me, it was always do as much international as you can, but also show Irish work. And for me, I guess it was an opportunity to share or to offer what I thought was interesting or important or doable or getawayable with across the breadth of international performance. There's always going to be a particular perspective. You're always constrained by your own references and your own taste and judgment. But again, I'll go back to what I felt was really important, apart from giving Irish artists and projects a platform, and the buoyancy that the Theatre Festival offers was to present international practice according to what I understood was, might be interesting for people. I mean, sometimes it was, I remember we brought the Worcester Group to Dublin for the first time, you know, and there's a company who'd been going since the 70s with their Hamlet, which people probably found a strong flavour, but it did really well and sold out. And I was getting all grandiose, and I thought, let's accompany it with a wraparound video program just to introduce who the Worcester Group are. And we would have heard of them, but only read about them, most people. And they, you know, I worked with their archivist, who was really cool and smart person. And we presented in the upstairs in the IFI some video documentation, which is actually really good quality, even the crude stuff in the 70s. But there was one particular one which I think was the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa, which featured maybe Steve Buscemi and Kate Volk, who's a kind of a long-term Worcester Group member, maybe Ron Walter, who's another one. Anyway, I was in the aisle, and there was a couple beside me, an older couple. And, you know, when they started doing all those kind of contemporary art bouncing around the place in the midst, they nearly died, and me with them. So I kind of realized there's only so much tolerance for, and even though this was like, you know, 20 years old or something. And I rang the woman to apologize to her. And the gist of it was, she said, I've only ever seen my husband make it. What are you doing to me? Sorry, that's a tangent. But, you know, so the Worcester Group went quite well. And, you know, and they came for the first time, brought back to back, who had been in one of Loughlin's festivals with Small Metal Albums, with a fantastic piece called Ganesh versus the Third Reich. And then we've done like smaller things that really have won people over, like Nassim, the one about which the Fringe had done a few years ago, his White Rabbit, Red Rabbit, when he couldn't leave Iran. So what am I saying? Yeah, so I wanted to kind of present things that would stimulate artists and audiences, and that would make it worth their while to congregate. If not always leaving it. So the ones that are more difficult is when the performance is perceived to be somewhat antagonistic, or challenging, or self-indulgent. But I think we actually have to really be carefully maintaining space for that as well.
I mean, I think it's interesting when you're saying, obviously, about, you know, the change in funding structures and the change in a lot of structures over the last decade or so. But also, that's a lot, you know, there's been incredible Irish work that has come through, you know, and within that kind of quasi, you know, European form. That's, you know, being crude. But I think that's what's been really interesting about the festival, and in the last number of years, it's been that.
Yeah. I think it's in a way, like, of course we want to bring the international, but I think a lot of the time the Irish artists have brought that international sensibility. Well, by which I mean just a different aesthetic to kind of playwriting. I love playwrights. Playwrights are great, no issue, but just writing different types of texts and different types of forms that would refer to other traditions, other, you know, performing arts traditions. And I think that's great.
Yeah, and can you just, as a producer, as a, you know, programmer, as a curator, as artist director of the festival, how, like, you talk to other directors, and, you know, a lot of them kind of, you know, once the work is there, they kind of find it very difficult to kind of sit in and watch, you know, early performances, or they kind of, you know, how are you around festival time, Willie? Like, how's that for you?
Excruciating.
Yeah,
it's the opposite of what I mean. I'm laughing, and you're so nervous, and you know, you have however many, like 20 something opening nights. Not even if they're not yours, even if it's a production of the Abbey or the Gate, you still have the kind of the mental energy and the stress of everything else you've got thinking about that's not happening in that room. So, and you go, Jesus, I can't remember this bit. Oh, fuck, they're climbing over the audience. Oh no, shit, there's news again. We didn't warn people, you know. So I think that, no, of course I enjoy, and that's what you're working towards, and it's fulfilling. And I suppose you want to, you hope that you've gotten it right and people appreciate it. I mean, for me, it's a failure actually if you alienate the audience, because you should have been able to describe it well enough or pitch it the right way so that it finds the right audience. So somebody kind of goes, that was the greatest load up, I don't know. Sometimes because their partner or their friend bought them a ticket, they didn't even know what they were going to. Yeah. And they might be kind of saying something that's considered by others to be a significant work of contemporary art is rubbish and wasn't as good as what they saw before. But no, I mean, it is. And what's really, like, so I think of last festival actually, and just thinking about the last Dublin Theatre Festival performance that I saw, and the first one one of the first ones that I saw last year. So at the end of the beginning of the festival, Michael Keegan-Dolan's Chalk House premiered Mom, on the back of a big success of Swan Lake, but not based on a known title. Or I mean, not that many people knew the ballet Swan Lake, but I guess it's there in the culture. And Mom was just, I literally had an out-of-body experience watching it. And I'd say we're seeing it like for maybe the second or third time. I'd seen it down, you know, at Dress in Kerry. And actually, no, the opening night of Mom, I was seeing it for the second time. And just Cormac Begley and the dancers and the set and the music from Stargate, I was just like, I was floating up above, you know, above the audience in the O'Reilly Theatre going, this is amazing. And that kind of thing of having such an intense experience of being there that you couldn't be there because you were thinking about it. It was just exhilarating. And I was just thinking about, you know, Mom opens with this inhalation of breath into the bellows of Cormac Begley's concertina. And it's just kind of gone, this idea of being in the same space with people. And then the very last performance of the festival, I think maybe barring in a new show, was a piece by a Portuguese director called Tiago Rodrigues called Sopro, which is the Portuguese word for breath. And that was based on the story of the woman who was the prompter at Teatro Dona Maria Doces, which is the place where he works in Lisbon, in one of their national theatres. And so this woman was the prompter, that old theatre system where you'd stand by, because they have, you know, plays and repertory, do a lot of plays each week, and people had to keep a lot of text in their mind. So she would stand at the side of the stage and she would whisper the words to people if they lost their lines. So in telling her story, whom he encountered at the theatre when he started working there, you know, we hear the whole history of the theatre, the plays that they would do, and the people who were there, and the personal dramas and the tragedies, and the gags about the actor who was deaf in one ear couldn't get the prompts because he was on the wrong side of the stage, and all these kind of theatrical pratfalls. But one of the last lines in this translated into English, and he like Tiago was great at this, you know, cranking it up, and it's some line about we breathe the same air. I was like, wow, that's live performance for me. So, you know, if you like, Mom was the inhalation and Soper was the exhalation of that festival. That's why it's so frustrating not to know what we're going to be able to do this year. But it was just wonderful. I mean, the audiences for Soper were okay. I wish more people had seen it and appreciated it, but it's those kind of moments in the theatre that are so, so special that you're never, ever, ever going to get looking at the screen, engaging as you are.
Well, I think, I mean, as said, a few people I've interviewed, for those that find it somewhere in the depths of YouTube in 20 years' time, we are speaking, you know, at the end of May or at the beginning, sorry, the 18th of May, at the height of, you know, well, first phase emerging from a lockdown in Ireland, but there's not, and as you say, there's an awful lot of talk going on about live performance, but that was the way you speak there so beautifully about the inhalation and exhalation and breathing the same air. I mean, that's kind of at the very hub of the issue that we face, you know, that.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm very mindful of that. Yeah, we can't share that air anymore, you know, because the aerosols are flying around in it. Yeah. And it's also like the kind of, the idea that the solution to our problem is to retreat into some kind of hermeticism, where we're sealed off from encountering other people. Now, let's not get too gross about it, but you know, you want to be able to get on a bus or be in the same space or be in a queue with somebody without wondering what. I'm thinking about, that's a metaphor, by the way, breathing the same air. You don't have to breathe some people's germs in, but yes, indeed. Yeah. There's a really profound hazard and challenge to what I just described there, being with a large group of people in another room, close to them, and watching other people close to others and touching each other, interacting with each other, and breathing that air. Yeah, for sure. So it's, I mean, I guess, well, at this moment, it's probably hard to see anything like normal. And some aspects of normal we may not want to return to, but I don't like this idea that the alternative is some kind of enforced sterility and separateness. Yeah. I want to see my mammy in July down in Abbey Leaks. Yeah. You know, I just think that we have to imagine what that might be. Yeah. And I guess, I mean, I was reading some encouraging article today, I think in the New York Times, about how the first tests in an antidote are maybe working, but I guess it'll be some time before it's verified and scaled. Pardon?
It's fascinating in relation to the arts, in relation to, you know, what I'm finding really interesting, but both from what you're saying about the way you're interested. I mean, obviously the internationalism is very difficult in the current climate, but also that sense of, like, you know, if art, you know, is nearly like kind of life ramped up, or an experiential of kind of, you know, or an artist's reflection on life. If we can't experience a normal life, it's fascinating now about how we get to reflect. And I think you're right. And there's no answers to this right now. There just seems to be a huge amount of kind of questions. And back, Willie, in relation to, say, the time, say, from Project particularly and into Dublin Theatre Festival, obviously things have, you know, you would have been placing work through the festival in loads of different venues. And you mentioned kind of back there when you were leaving college, you know, with Liz Cannon working in all sorts of, you know, weird and wonderful places. And I think now that we can't open our venues as they stand, surely there's a really interesting discussion to be had about how we kind of find different venues now that might suit.
Yes, but also there's a conversation to be had about why, although we're notionally more prosperous, we have fewer venues full stop in Dublin. You know, the SFX has turned into apartments, the Crypt has turned into a revenue museum, theatre space is gone, John Player is going to be developed into apartments. You know, lots of places don't exist. I mean, the City Art Centre is still derelict. Maybe going on 17 years now. And they were known them, like, you remember the pillars and the City Arts and the alcoves and the crypt, and they were never perfect, or the noise from the Lane in project, but they were there. There were more of them. And all of this has been gobbled up by development and speculation. I still think, like, well, we use the O'Reilly Theatre, and prior to that, let's say the John Player would have been the large venue. That Dublin City Centre, the City Centre specifically, really lacks a large venue that is accessible to, and I'm sure Tivoli's gone as well, Andrews Lane too. So, you know, somewhere with 400 or so seats with a decent sized stage. Producers tend to want more seats, less stage. The art people tend to want more stage, less seats. But somewhere that is a civic venue that is available to independent operators, that is a stepping stone between Project or Smock Alley and the Gaiety or the Olympia or Board Gosh, or maybe just the next, maybe no stepping, that might be a destination, so that you can capitalize the production differently and try and grow a larger audience for, you know, indigenous production. If the ceiling on your, you know, on your ambition can be the 180 seats in Project is, you know, not great. Or else you have to stick your neck really far out by going to a much larger event that doesn't necessarily suit lots of different types of productions.
Yeah, and I think as well, you mentioned there are lots of different types of production, because if nothing else, you know, or as well as a lot else, is, you know, that both from your interest and from the work that you bring, I mean, that, you know, music and the, you know, dance and the wider performing arts have kind of stayed with your, I suppose, like, curatorial aesthetic kind of, you know, through your career. And I think that's that, yeah, it's kind of those spaces are kind of have become split, you know what I mean? There's the music venues and there's theatre places and there's kind of that.
Yeah. But I mean, I've always been quite you know, Catholic in the sense of, like, we've had visual arts projects in the festival, we've had kind of installations, we've had stuff that's more kind of dance, maybe dance theatre, and I think that's fine as long as it's got a theatrical quotient in it. One of the things I was looking at for this year, it looks now like it would be very problematic, was having a stronger musical element, you know, work that had, you know, theatrical sensibility, that was fresh, that was staged. I was talking to a music promoter about this, but then I'll have to keep for next year. And in other words, something that was kind of in the same family as the theatre performance, but more with more of a musical accent on
it. Before I let you go, but Willie, in the sense that, you know, the city, because obviously, you know, you obviously have use of the city as a citizen that kind of works and lives in Dublin as well, and you're keen swimmer and keen, you know, usage of that kind of stuff. Is that, I suppose, has that become markedly different living in Dublin in the past decade? Do you think has that kind of changed for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, like, I've alluded to it already, in that, like, prosperity has squeezed out a lot of arts and cultural activity. It's also brought a lot of welcome diversity to the city that's not yet reflected significantly in or celebrated in art. I think you'd like to think perhaps it's because it's at an early stage. Certainly in kind of popular music, obviously you see people like doing the concert the other night, Denise Chila, or what's his name, Jafaris or Soleil, or people like that, like, you know, artists that my kids ought to be listening to, but I'm listening to. So you kind of see that coming through music, but not in lots of, maybe because that's more accessible, but not in other aspects of life. The city there's a weird atmosphere in the city at the moment, though, because sitting here in Pilgrim, I'm looking out at the Mater Hospital. So that's a very pertinent reminder of the grief and the sadness that is lingering in the air. But at the same time, because the city has slowed down, because a lot of traffic has been removed, because people have to stay within their zone, and because they're appreciating amenities like the Phoenix Park nearby to me, or other parks. There's at the same time, Dublin's quite chill. So there's a mixture of kind of awfulness and peacefulness at the same time that I'm trying to get my head around. That's what artists do, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I'd like to think that we can hold on to some of the. Obviously, people have to process the grief, and it's really, really difficult. And I can think of people I know who've been bereaved, and you say that we're great at. Sorry, the end of this morbid tongue. We're great at death in Ireland, but that's been taken away from us.
Yeah.
But we're also good at celebration, and I'm waiting for that moment.
Yeah.
You have to kind of keep her lit.
Yeah.
And what's very frustrating is that the way we usually do it is we get together.
Yeah.
Today is the first day you can go in your group of 4,
Yeah.
but I'd be aiming for more than 4, I think.
Well, I think we all would have to, or we'd all be kind of talking on Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back a second bit, Willie. I mean, I think as well, you know, just that kind of forward joy, because the presence of children's work in the theatre festival as well has been, that seems to be kind of it's a crucial part of it. It's a great kind of leveler.
I know, that's been there since the 90s.
Yeah, no, but I mean in relation to the way, I suppose, the importance of it being maintained there rather than finding it.
Absolutely. My colleague Maria Fleming, who's the festival general manager, was previously the curator while she worked at the Arc of what was then called the Family Season. It's now called the Theatre for Children Season. And if it's a small thing, but in our festival brochure, the printed brochure, the Theatre for Children Family Season was at the back, and you had a picture at the top of the page and text at the bottom of the page, whereas the other shows had a whole page for a picture and a whole page for the text. So Maria made the case to me, and it was heard that it should be given the same status, and we do this. And actually, another thing that in terms of like as an indication, when we were working with our partner venues like yourselves and Axis or Civic, Triact or Pavilion, instead of saying that's the other stuff at the end of the program, it was just in the appropriate place according to where it happened. So Theatre for Children is absolutely important. In fact, where the big deficit in our programming is that I've identified and only really begun to address is they're not for children, but for teenagers. So in other words, we take care of people up to age 12, and then kind of the entry level for the rest of the program, not always, but generally is 18 plus.
Yeah.
So why do we forget about these people who've engaged with when they're younger? Maybe because they hate theatre, I don't know. But I think, and so you could look at the inclusion of 2, 3, maybe 4 projects by Dublin Youth Theatre in my time at the Theatre Festival as an indication of that, even if we're not making or presenting theatre for teenagers, that we're involving them in the festival, and they and their families can go and see it, and other people too, as part of the festival. Okay. So that's what that's about.
Yeah, and it's great.
It's 4 times, because we had the Pampan show with yourselves. There was a Spring Awakening at Triact, and then a show by Sean Dunn, show by Dylan Great in the festival. Yeah. And okay, the performers are young people, but everybody else is a theatre professional. And many of those, it's actually interesting in the Sleepwalkers to see Peter Hanley's daughter coming through, it's like the next generation. So, yes, theatre, it is important, of course. And I'm thinking as well about this with, young people. We have 3 children in this house, not really engaging with the news or, just comprehending it, but like just hearing bad stuff all the time, every day. In the ambiance, they don't necessarily wake up and tune into Morning Ireland like we do, but just thinking like what effect that's having on young people, and how they can be helped to think about and talk through that through, amongst other things, performing arts and culture. And also, again, not in the Marie Kondo way, but to find joy.
Yeah. Well, actually, Willie, that's a great place to finish, that find joy, because I think that's going to be, amidst all the sadness and the grief, as you say, there's a kind of, it's beholden on us all to find those mechanisms to bring people together.
So, and I hope that when we are looking around to declutter, that theatre will spark joy in us and remain in our house. A la Marie Kondo,
Willie, thanks a million for taking part.
Good to talk to you.
No worries.